I'm not asking for a free shop for free, but I'm not asking for it. I know that since he is working over there,
Good morning and welcome to the Rapid City Planning Commission meeting for January 23rd, 2020. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the Planning Commission agenda, there are speaker request forms on the table along the left wall. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the staff seated at the left of the dais. At this time, we would also like to ask that if any member of the audience has a cell phone or other electronic device, that you either turn it off or turn the ringer to silent. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. Items 1 and 2 have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item, though, may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. Findings of this planning commission are recommendations to the city council. The city council will make the final decision. Any items 1 through 2 that staff would like to remove?
Item 2, please.
Okay. Then, would anybody like to pull the last meeting minutes? Audience or planning commission? All right, Galen made the motion to approve number 1, and Mike Gallagher seconded that motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 2 is a rezone property from General Ag District to Medium Density Residential District. This property is located at the eastern terminus of Moon Meadows Drive. That would be east of Mount Rushmore Road, also known as Highway 16. We, as you may have noticed, have received letters from 3 of the property owners within the area. 2 of them, they're in support of the medium density residential zoning, and the assisted living center that the applicants are proposing. They are concerned with other uses that may come in under the medium density residential district. The applicants have agreed that they would ask that this be continued to allow them to bring in an initial plan development to show the layout of what that would look like and commit the use to an assisted living center. So with that, we are recommending that this item be continued to your March 5th Planning Commission meeting.
Thanks, Vicki. Karen made the motion then to continue to March 5th, and Vince seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3.
Morning. Give me a second. It appears we forgot to get the laptop up. Item number 3 is 19 PD 047, a final plan development overlay to expand an auto repair shop known as Godfrey's Brake Service, located at 110 North Poplar Avenue. In particular, what the applicant's proposing to do is construct a 6,800 square foot addition onto their existing building, which puts the overall expansion at greater than 20%, which requires coming into compliance with the zoning ordinance and the requirements of the light industrial district. So here we have an aerial view of the property. You can see the existing building. What the applicant is requesting are 4 specific zoning exceptions. The first being to reduce the minimum required parking from 63 parking spaces to 20 parking spaces. Currently there's some existing parking that's paved on the north side of the lot, and there are 13 parking spaces along this west side of the property. Well, if we go through the rest, they're also requesting an exception to waive the requirement to pave the vehicle storage area. So this area, the property is used for storage and is currently gravel. And for wheeled vehicles, we expect paved surfacing. The third exception is to waive the requirement to provide an opaque screening fence around the outdoor storage area, which would be on that north side, the east, the south, and the west. And the final exception is to reduce the minimum required landscaping from 121,000 or so points to 47,290. Property zone light industrial district, and it's in a established light industrial corridor north of East Omaha Street. And the future land use is identified as light industrial, so the use is appropriate in the area. And here we have the major street plan showing it's kind of boxed in with some arterial streets with access directly onto Omaha. The applicant's proposed site plan, so they are proposing to construct additional parking on site, thus the reduction from 63 spaces to 20. Part of their justification for that is that the 13 existing parking spaces along Poplar Avenue provide sufficient customer parking, and there are 2 ADA accessible spaces. The issue with these parking spaces is that they back directly into the right-of-way. There's no space in that area for them to back out of those parking spaces without entering the right-of-way and backing into it. That's one of the main concerns that our Public Works Department has, is that with a building permit, sidewalk is going to be required along East Chicago Street and North Poplar. So with that sidewalk going in and having vehicles driving over it and backing out into it, it's a safety issue for pedestrians. In addition, should Poplar Avenue be reconstructed in the future, they're probably going to be getting curb along here, which would eliminate those parking spaces. So to ensure that there is adequate parking for the use, staff is recommending approval of the exception to reduce the parking from 63 to 33. So if they were able to pave an additional 13 parking spaces and remove the ones on North Poplar, then we would grant that exception to reduce the parking from 63 to 33, whereas their request right now is from 63 to 20. The second exception being to waive the requirement to pave the outdoor storage area. So paving the additional parking on site and removing the 13 parking spaces along North Poplar Avenue. Public Works staff has indicated that doing that would justify granting the exception to waive the requirement to pave the remainder of the storage area. They do have circulation paved around the building. So with, again, the exception in the stipulation in the staff report is that the exception be granted contingent upon those 13 parking spaces being removed and constructed on that northeast side of the property. The third exception is to waive the requirement to provide an opaque screening fence along, or to screen the outdoor storage area. Along the east property line, they are proposing some landscaping, and there's also an established existing industrial use there, as well as along that south property line. Staff would be willing to grant the exception to waive the requirement to provide the opaque screening fence along that north and east property lines. The intent of the opaque screening fence is aesthetic as well as security for the property, but to create that streetscape by keeping inoperable vehicles or just vehicles that are being serviced screened so that the aesthetics of the site are maintained. So granting that exception, and the stipulation says that we would still require the opaque screening fence along the west property line where the storage area is, and on the north side of the property where the parking would end. Again, we're looking at compromise here. The final exception is to reduce the landscaping. So they are proposing new landscaping along this east property line. As I noted, it provides some of the screening intended by that screening fence. But what we're missing is landscaping, which the intent being to beautify the property and the area, and it is supported by the comprehensive plan. So removing these 13 on parking spaces which back into the right-of-way, replacing that with some landscaping, adding some landscaping along that north side. That would provide additional landscaping points, so we would be recommending to approve that exception contingent upon, again, those parking spaces being removed and replaced with some landscaping and additional landscaping being provided along that north property line. Elevation of the proposed expansion. Sorry. Went out to the site, so there is fencing with barbed wire, which is currently in place. We revised the ordinance, the zoning ordinance, I believe last year, to when there is a screening fence required, that it not be chain link with slats, that it be an actual opaque solid fence. So in this area, this is where the proposed building would be, but along here would be where we would be looking to get that opaque screening fence. This is looking south along Poplar, to the east, to the north along Poplar. This is that gravel storage area which is existing. You see the wheeled vehicles in there. This is along the north side of the building, the drive, which would access parking on that east side of the building. And this is looking west along Chicago Street. We can see there's existing sidewalk on the property across the street. Looking north from that north property line. So you can see it's an industrial area, and this is looking along that north property line to the east along Chicago, and where that parking area would be located behind the building. Behind the building also being supported by our comprehensive plan. Here we have those parking spaces which back into the right-of-way. It's pretty much a roll curb there. We're expecting to see sidewalk and landscaping, something to add a little character to the neighborhood, as well as removing those non-compliant parking spaces, and then having two of the two ADA spaces located along there. Technically, they're non-compliant because they back into the right-of-way and they're not in compliance with our zoning ordinance. This is property to the south, which we saw, I believe, a couple years ago, Grimm's Pump and Industrial, and we can see how their parking is, how it's, doesn't back into the right-of-way, but just the layout of that parking to the south. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the final plan development with stipulations. And if there are any questions for staff at this time.
Thanks, Fletcher. Any questions for staff? Eric Ottenbacher?
Could you use your mic, please?
The ADA spaces that are required are 3, and the proposed is 1. And we're going to make sure that they have 3 spaces.
Based on the parking required is 63, so for 63 parking spaces, they'd be required to have 3 ADA spaces. For the reduction, the exception request to 20, they would only be required to have 1. For the 33, which staff is recommending approval of, 2 would be required.
Okay, thank you.
Eric Heikus.
Morning, Fletcher. Question, will there be a resubmittal of these drawings to show the changes that you suggest along the right-of-way, how the fencing will actually be located, the opaque location, and the buffer on the east side?
That would be submitted with the building permit if this is
Would it?
approved.
Okay.
Other questions for Fletcher at this time? If not, I've got a speaker request for him from Leah Berg. Leah, if you want to come up, and please identify yourself once at the microphone.
Good morning. My name is Leah Berg. I'm with ACES. It's the engineering firm that's helping Godfrey Brake do this addition in this project. And I just wanted to go over a few brief items to help you understand what they're doing and why they're doing it and where they're located. You know, they were originally in this Rapid City community from 1955 down on Omaha Street. The 1972 flood forced them to relocate to where they are now. They've been at this location since 1974. That's 46 years that they've been part of this community and functioning at this property. So they went and decided that, can we bring up the layout just so I can see the aerial? I just wanted to show you, right now they function by working on that concrete area where the addition is proposed to be located. So right now they work in this area here. And so what all they were wanting to do was they work on vehicles on that concrete pad right now. They want to be able to work on them year round. They want to work on them when it's snowing, when it's raining. So they wanted to expand their building to enclose that area. Just cover it, you know, so that they know that they'd be able to work in that space as a repair shop as they function right now. So they went and hired an architect, they hired an engineer, they hired a contractor, RCS Construction. They go to the city to get a building permit, and then they find out that they go back 19 years ago when they did a small addition on the building, and now they're going to hold that 20% expansion from 19 years ago for a 25-foot, you know, expansion that they put on their building from 1974. So if that wasn't going back 19 years ago to a small addition that they did, we would be within that 20% expansion area, and we wouldn't even be here today. We would be moving forward with a building permit, it would be under construction, and they would be growing their small community business. This is a small family-owned, family-operated location, and they're part of the community. They support our community. If they, you know, can't grow in this location, it's probably not going to be good. Their competition is growing in the area, and because Rapid City is growing. But they're not looking to move. They're not looking to put up a new use or new building. They just want to function as they do today under a roof. So part of that, you know, being that we go back 19 years to hold them to that little expansion, bumps them over 20%. So we go, okay, let's work with some of the requirements. We'll meet you in the middle. We'll try to comply, but trying to apply current standards to an established location that's been in operation for 46 years, they utilize their entire space. They know how much parking they need in this time, and the parking that they need is sufficiently taken care of on Poplar Avenue. That's their public entrance. Their public entrance is right there on Poplar Avenue. That's their front door. They have a small showroom area on that space. The rest of their building is shop, storage, warehouse. They have forklifts running. They have large equipment. It's a hazard. It's an employee-only zone. So if we're going to have public parking back here, they're still going to have to walk all the way around to get to their front door, because there's no way to rework the entire inside of their building to make it to where it's a safe place for the public to walk through. So, but we're gonna put that parking in. We're gonna meet them in the middle, we're gonna put parking in the back, even though we know it's not required, but for their operation. And then we're gonna put landscaping along this side, even though, as you can see, light industrial, this is not a pretty place. This hasn't been a pretty place. This won't be a pretty place. This is a set light industrial zone district for a reason. If you look at everything around them, they're buried in the middle of light industrial. That's not changing. They've been there since, like I say, 1974. They continue to want to be there to operate as part of the community. But we're gonna put that landscaping in. We're gonna try to accommodate without taking away their storage area, where their trucks are at. They work on semis, dump trucks, tanker trucks. They are having those trucks circulate through this area. Not out in the road. They take deliveries on their property where trucks come in and make deliveries, and then they can go back out. They're not delivering in the center of the road like a lot of businesses end up having to do. So we're gonna put in the landscape, we're gonna put in the parking. We're gonna try to meet them within reason with city staff requirements. And the opaque fencing, we are asking for an exception to the opaque fencing. Because again, we're buried in the center of light industrial. It's not gonna help beautify the area to, you know, block off the center. So we are asking for that exception. When we came back in, we found out that we were also triggered to pave the storage area or our yard area. To be able to pave that entire yard area, that's $300,000. And it's not warranted right now. We don't need it paved. They don't need it paved. It functions just fine as it is. Having to pave it is a strict on-paper requirement that that box got triggered by being outside of that 20% expansion. So we're willing to add parking. We're willing to add the landscaping. What we can't lose is this parking along Poplar. We know we can't count it. We know we can't add to it. We can't create that parking today. And we're not asking to create any more parking that backs into Poplar. But as you can see, it's paved from this building to this building. There's no curb and gutter. It's paved. It's an 80-foot wide road. It has a drain pan, not even rollover curb and gutter, all the way down to Omaha Street on both sides, if you could see in those pictures. And I know that he highlighted Grimm's Pump, that they reworked and changed their parking so that they don't back into Poplar, but they were just parked up against a snowbank. They still come right on in and out of Poplar. They're on Poplar Avenue because it works. And we don't know of any time where there's huge collisions and crashes and issues caused by these customers backing into Poplar Avenue. If there were established issues, we would totally understand needing to take it out. They would want to take it out. They don't want their customers getting into issues coming to their property. So we can't allow the parking to be removed. We're willing to try to meet the requirements and come up to city code, meet you in the middle, but the fact of having to remove that parking is just unacceptable to their business. I mean, you can't take away all their front door parking and make everybody supposed to park in the back of their building. It just doesn't work for them. That's their business plan. That's always been their business plan for 46 years. That's how it's functioned. We're just asking to keep those parking spaces there. We will do the additional parking. We will try to add landscaping, but paving the lot doesn't make any sense. Opaque fencing doesn't make any sense. So with the exceptions for 1, 2, and 4, the stipulations that the city added, we're just asking we'll do those things, but the stipulation of having to remove that parking on Poplar doesn't make sense for this business, this small, family-owned and operated business that's a part of our community. So, can I answer any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for Leah Berg? I don't have any right now. We might call you up.
Okay, sounds good. It was a lot of information, and I appreciate the opportunity to let you know.
Actually, I do have one question, just to clarify.
Yeah.
I always try to keep score here. What you're asking for, I got the fencing and to continue using the parking on Poplar. If you if we came up with that, are you agreeing in principle to the 33 spots versus the 20?
Yep, we'll add the 33 spots in the yard. We'll add that landscaping along that we proposed.
Okay, so that's the compromise you're proposing, is the parking as suggested by staff, landscaping as suggested by staff, if you can have the non-opaque fencing and parking along Poplar.
Yeah, leave the non-conforming parking along Poplar that's already there. Just leave it alone.
All right. Kelly?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Just a question for clarification. The business to the south from that overhead shot, it looks like the business directly to the south parks along Poplar, and the trucking company across from the street backs into Poplar currently. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're gonna have this business and this one. Again, though, if they were to want to expand, it would trigger coming into compliance with our zoning ordinance.
One more question on the opaque fencing. Is there an option for, in lieu of actual fencing, structural fencing, sort of a poly liner or a cover that attaches to chain link, something, cheaper option? Does that even exist?
In the last year or so, the Planning Commission and City Council adopted a revised an ordinance amendment which removed chain link with slats as an appropriate screening fence for this purpose.
Vicki?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with what Leah said, that Godfrey's have been in the city for a long time, and they bring a business and do a service for this community that is very appreciated. With that being said, please note that we have limited opportunities when we see these areas that have been developed before regulations were in place that would try to improve the looks and the safety of how a property functions. Light industrial does allow for the repair that they are doing. It also requires that all of the areas of repair must be within an enclosed area. So adding on this addition is needed for them in order to comply with the regulations as it stands today, because that would be a violation to work on vehicles on the exterior of the building. The comment that we would want an opaque fence along the northern part of the storage area, if they were to put landscaping along that north lot line, I think we could support taking that screening fence off that north side, because the landscaping would then meet that need, similar to what they're proposing to do on the east lot line. The issue with the parking on the west side of the building, and certainly we appreciate people pull in, and that's the shortest steps to the front door. But as a part of this, they will be required to put in sidewalk, and that now we're going to have vehicles that are either parked over the sidewalk or definitely backing across the sidewalk. These are the very streets that Public Works look at very hard to determine when they're going to be put on the list to have improvements completed, because of this issue that it is just free directional in how people are backing into those right-of-ways. When that curb and gutter comes in and those sidewalks are in, that parking is going to go away at that time. As we're looking at this, to ensure that they've got the sufficient parking, the design of this addition should have been laid out to consider how do we get the parking for these customers, not just employees, so that they can access the business portion of the building, noting that it won't create a safety issue for them on that west side of the building. So looking at what our recommendation is, that is a huge compromise from what the regulations require and what they had requested. We lean toward giving them more of what they requested than the regulation did actually require. So we are hoping that you do support staff's stipulations. We would, though, make the revision that the screening fence along that north lot portion of the storage would not be required. Only the small area on the west portion, as Fletcher pointed out in his presentation. And that would be that portion that's along Poplar. And then the rest could be free-floating where they could get their trucks turned around.
Thank you, Vicki. Galen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I'm tending to side with about everything the applicant is proposing to do here and with their side. Frankly, I think our standards for light industrial districts are a little heavy-handed. I mean, I don't think we need to have screening fences to hide people working on cars. I mean, it's especially for an industrial site like this, where it's inside it's neighboring other industrial sites. I just don't see the point of having the screening fence, especially on the north side by the parking lot. So I guess the question would be maybe to clarify something that Vicki just said with the sidewalks. As part of this plan, do we have sidewalks going in? Is that what we have to be required here, or would that be something that we can?
With a building permit, they'd be required to install sidewalks. It'd be up to the city council to grant a variance.
But that would be from the city council. We couldn't help with that at all. Okay. So I mean, I just struggle with how. I mean, customers are still going to park there. How do you? Maybe that's a question for city staff. How would you eliminate that parking on the front? Just by putting up a sign? Is that how you eliminate those parking spaces along the front there?
Mr. Chair?
Vicki?
As Fletcher pointed out in his presentation, they have request for a large portion of the landscape points to be waived, and we are supporting that is reduced, but that landscaping be provided in this area. So that would take care of any parking that would then be put back to soils and landscaped.
Okay, I'm just trying to find that on which stipulation is that?
Number 4.
Number 4. Okay.
And can I just insert there,
Hang
just
on
about
1
the...
second.
Go ahead.
Actually,
Galen, you good?
I'm done here. Go ahead, Leah. I'll kind of ask you what you
I
think
just
about
wanted to
those.
say that they want the landscaping in that area. We're willing to add that additional, which would be about 9,000 points of landscaping. We just don't understand why it has to be at that location. Why can't it be somewhere else on the property? Because it just doesn't make sense to put it in that area.
They're purposely putting the landscaping in the front to block off that parking is what it sounds like to me. And I just don't like that idea. There's no way the customers are going to park behind the building only when the gates are open and then come around the whole way. It's not going to work if you try to purposely close off that parking. It makes no sense.
Mr. Chair,
Fletcher?
I'd like to point out in our design standards, it's one of the things we identified as parking location and screening. So the adopted comprehensive plan supports, and this is for light industrial, supports the placement of parking to the rear of buildings and using landscaping to screen and soften the appearance of industrial and employment areas. So we're just enforcing the zoning ordinance and supported by the comprehensive plan.
Eric Hikas.
Looks like there's some thoughtful compromises on the table here. Fletcher, I think you just answered my question or my query, which was the intent of that buffering for industrial. My interpretation of is the same as yours in that we buffer the parking and service areas from right-of-ways or unlike zoning adjacencies. Is that a correct comment?
Is that Fletcher?
Yeah.
Yes, Fletcher, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that answers my question. Just a simple suggestion then. There is opaque landscape options for the north side of the property, and a suggestion could be to consider upright juniper or something that is year-round and provides that screening. So I'm just going to throw that out there as an idea, just a thought.
Vince?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So currently the parking, if I may, is going north and south, as opposed to east and west, perpendicular to the building. Now, if you move the parking from north to south to east to west, I know it would reduce parking spaces, but would that work for driving in and out of those parking spaces?
Well, you mean if they put parallel parking along the
Parallel.
front of the building?
Right.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah,
so,
maybe just pull
let's
up the
have
site
Fletcher
plan.
bring that up. Vince, I see what you're saying.
Also, Todd Pekosh would like to answer.
Todd?
Yeah, that was one thing that was discussed, is if that parking went away in that street, if there's a curb installed there, it would be on-street public parking where people could use it, park on the street, and then walk into the business. It would just be public on-street parking as opposed to on private property backing into the right-of-way. And the second issue that we have with this building expansion is, yes, it is going to be very difficult to mitigate that parking somewhere else. When they add on to the south, it makes it even more difficult to find a location for that parking to go. So it's now's the time to kind of figure out what will happen with that parking, in my mind.
Thanks, Todd. Can I, before we go back to you, Vince, we're never going to be able to read that. How far is the building from the property line?
I believe that setback says 34 feet,
Okay.
or no, yeah, existing building setback.
Your eyes are much better than mine, Vince.
So is the street currently compatible to, off-site parking?
Currently, there's like a roll curb in front of the entire property, so no. But that's where, if there was a curb, then you could have on-street parking. It's wide enough for it.
And when was the plan to put in a curb?
We have no plan in our 5-year plan to reconstruct it. That would be something if they wanted to do that they could do that as a part of the other modifications in the right-of-way.
Okay. But right now, as long as the parking that is on site, it could be reduced to parallel parking as opposed to the north-south parking plan that it has right now. Am I right?
Mr. Chair?
Vicki?
So the 33 feet it would support parallel parking adjacent to the building and still leave an access aisle. It would require that it be one way in and one way out. I don't know how many spaces they could get in there. Again, I'm always hesitant to design a project in a meeting. If it's your desire that staff sit down with the applicants and their consultant to look at whether or not there is the possibility of designing parallel parking on site, noting that if curbing is ever provided along Poplar, on-street parking would also provide additional parking needs as we hope the company continues to grow, then I would suggest that we continue this, let us have that meeting, and bring you back a site plan that shows how that works.
Vince, you good?
Yes, thank you.
John, here?
It said in the history, they had applied for a reduced front yard setback from 25 feet to 0 feet, and that the Board of Adjustment denied it. Was that ever overruled? So that doesn't, so they're just legal non-conforming, or was that for building the addition? What?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So they were proposing a 0-foot setback along the north property line previously. So that's what the variance, they were going to build an expansion along the north side of the building. That was the only variance. I don't believe at that time that it triggered, that it was a greater than 20% expansion, so it didn't trigger coming into compliance with everything else. Also, the report said that they would address landscaping and parking with the building permit, so it wasn't even part of the request. But the variance was denied. And then, so that was in 2001. They did then build or did expand, which didn't trigger coming into compliance. However, this is cumulatively over the 20%.
Good, John? Okay. Galen?
Thank you. So, again, I'm kind of hammering on this backing into the right-of-way issue. I think that is the main thing here, because if I'm picking up what Leah is saying, what the applicant is saying is if you limit that parking, the business can't function. So that's the most important part. I think we need to figure out how to find the right solution for that. And it just seems silly to me that we're saying you can put a sidewalk and force the cars onto the street, and that is more advantageous, or we'd prefer that rather than having the cars parked on the property. I just can't, I don't agree with that. And I hear what Fletcher's saying, where we have a comprehensive plan, we're just trying to meet what the comprehensive plan says, but I guess what I'm saying is I think the comprehensive plan is wrong on some of these items, and I think we need to allow them to function as it is. So maybe a question, if you put Lee on the spot, is have you thought about the parallel parking scenario where you drive through one way and parallel park in front of the building? Is that something you had considered yet, or what are your thoughts on that? That seems like about the only viable alternative here.
Yep, we did talk about making that parallel parking. They actually need the amount of parking that's out there right now to function as they do. Sometimes it does expand to where they need those 13 spaces out there. One thing that we looked at that, but it wasn't supported by staff because it doesn't beautify it. It doesn't put any landscaping there. So they're willing to waive everything else as long as we give them landscaping in the front of that building, which even though they're not even connected. But yeah, we did consider that.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'm still leaning towards agreeing to keep the existing parking in as is and granting that exception, just on the fact that all the neighboring properties do it. There's no immediate plans to reconstruct that street where we would need to have that right, where we absolutely need to have that sidewalk. The sidewalk wouldn't connect to the neighboring property. There's not a sidewalk on the neighboring property, I believe. So I'm tending to agree with keeping it as is. So I don't know if I'm ready for a motion. I have to look through the stipulation how to phrase that, but I'll stop there.
Kelly?
I'll try to be quick. Just for anybody who's never been in Godfrey, I really feel for the business owners. You know, it isn't zone industrial, but it's not like it's a factory where street access and entries don't matter. On that side where that parking is, they have a showroom, they have a parts counter, they have office space. I mean, that's kind of a business killer to relocate and have them restructure that entire facility to accommodate the public on the north side. It's going to be really difficult, and I would just hope that a compromise could be reached. I've been a business owner myself, and that would put a huge dent in operations. I mean, it's a really tough call, so I hope that however this pans out, something can be worked out.
Eric Ottenbacher?
In this situation, I agree with Vicki. This is not the time or place to come up with an ultimate idea or plan. I think I would propose that we defer this to a future meeting so that we can get together with Public Works, engineering staff, planning staff to come up with a viable compromise, whether it's parallel parking or whether it's angled parking in the back, but this is not the time or place to come up with a final plan. We do have set standards and rules, and we're trying to, as a community, beautify the area, so existing appearances, legal nonconforming or not, you have to start someplace. And if that means that we add a little beautification to a light industrial area and other businesses will eventually have to fall in place if they ever expand, then so be it. But we do have to stick to some kind of general standards that we all kind of need to follow, and not just do what feels good, but we have to come up with some kind of compromise as well, and be willing to compromise. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Vicki?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This has been a great discussion. I really appreciate the clarity that Leah has brought to her clients' concerns. And Galen, your comments are well heard, too. I would like the opportunity to meet again with the applicants. I was not at that previous meeting, but listening to what you've said today, certainly staff would like to work with them to find that compromise to provide some customer parking on the front of that building and securing that additional parking then to the rear of the building. And we can then talk through the screening and then fine-tune where that landscaping could be as well.
Thanks, Vicki. Vince, we got you up.
Do we have a motion on the floor from Galen? Is that
No motion.
No motion. Then I make a motion to move this to a meeting
March
down the
6th,
road.
Or February 6th. That would
February
just be 2
6th.
weeks.
February 6th. Okay. Vince made the motion to continue item number 3 to February 6th to allow the applicant and staff to work through options to provide parking on the front side of the building. Is there a second? Eric Heikus? Okay. Any discussion on that motion? Karen, I have your light up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had the light up before, but I approve the, or support the motion that's on hand. I can understand the reasoning for their issues, but I also know there's issues of safety in the future and today, and I hope that something can be worked out because it is difficult to have parking in the back, but maybe I'll let you guys work something out, hopefully, and see what we can come up with. So.
Other discussion on the motion? All those in favor of continuing this item to February 6th, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4.
Item number 4 is a conditional use permit to allow a microbrewery. This is another good one, in a good way. Existing building located at 2441 Dakota Craft Drive. The applicant, Lost Cabin Beer Company, is proposing to open a microbrewery, which is not going to have, it's just for production and distribution, so there's not going to be a bar area or a restaurant. It's primarily going to be for offices and production and distribution, and this is located along Seeger and Dakota Craft Drive, again, a light industrial district where a microbrewery is a conditional use. So this definitely fits in, and it's great to see local business expanding. Here we have light industrial for the future land use, and then Seeger Drive identified as a minor arterial with great connection to Interstate 90 and that whole distribution and network. The applicant submitted a site plan showing what their interior of the existing building would look like. They'd be adding a dumpster pad on the north side of the building, some mechanical pads along the west side of the building, and then a walk-in cooler on that south side of the building. So those would be the additions to the property that they'd be proposing. Some of the pictures from the applicant. Here we have their proposed signage, what it would look like on the building. And then the sign was posted on the property. This is looking at west into the property, across the street to the east. So this is a developing light industrial area. Along Dakota Craft Drive to the south, where we do have some of those big industrial buildings. Really good looking industrial park. And then west along Seeger, where Seeger dead ends, and to the north, some more land void of structural development, and then back east along Seeger Drive. Again, this is a great project for the city. We hope the applicant has all the success, and staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit.
Thanks, Fletcher. Any questions for staff on this one? Comments? All right, Karen made the motion to approve item number 4 with the staff stipulations, and Mike Goller seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, end of the regular agenda. Staff items today?
We have a couple items. The first one, you may recall a few months ago, we brought to you the discussion about revising the office commercial district to eliminate single-family townhome and duplexes from that district, noting that if you're going to be developing with a residential use, you should be zoned residentially, not commercially. So we started down that path at your direction, and we had a discussion at Coffee with Planners. We also had a public open house, sending out notices to those that would be impacted by it. And we are now ready to bring forward 10 of those applications, which will impact about 95 properties, to the March 5th Planning Commission meeting. And so you're aware, we are also sending each one of them a certified letter telling them that in the near future, exactly what those dates are, that we will be bringing forward a rezone, sitting down one-on-one with those that do call or come in and see us, and securing what that zoning is specific to their needs, if it needs to be medium density or low density. And then we will send out additional mailings as per our ordinance, not only to them, but to the area property owners, to put everyone on notice of the intent. So just be prepared at that March 5th meeting. We will have several applications that's just in addressing this, and hopefully we'll go in there with the property owners fully aware and in compliance. And we are doing this without any fee to the property owner.
Sounds good. One question on that one. We haven't made the change yet to remove these items. This is just in being ahead of that, proactive, and making sure the property owners are aware of that before an amendment comes forward.
Right. If we were to amend the office commercial district and not address this, we would create a lot of legal non-conforming properties, which would mean they could not expand, get a zoning letter of compliance. They'd have to stop at that time and rezone, and we don't want that to happen.
Okay.
So we're trying to get ahead of it.
Sounds good. You had a second one. Oh, Ken.
Also, we'd like to invite you to come to our next Coffee with Planners event, which will be Wednesday, February the 5th. As we have been doing recently, we have 3 different discussion tables. We're going to try something new with one of our tables this time. It's going to be Ask a Planner table. So we will have several staff available to address and talk about various topics, address questions of anything that is brought up at that time. Also, we'll have a table that will be reviewing the Metropolitan Transportation Plan update, and another one that will address a proposal for increasing our requirements for dark sky lighting throughout the city. So Wednesday, February 5th, 9 o'clock.
All right. Thank you. 9 o'clock. I was hoping that John Roberts would be here. I noticed that the proposed TIF rewrite got kicked back to the planning department fairly quickly on Tuesday night. Does that, if a task force is formed as was suggested by council, whatever comes out of that, does that come back to this body or does it go directly to city council?
Yes, it would come back to this body before going on to city council. I'll just let you know our approach with that is we are not actively pursuing the creation of that task force. If it does get created, we will cooperate with that effort. However, we feel like we've done our best efforts over several years of proposing what we think is a good revision to the policy. So if others want to come up with a different proposal, that's great. We'll assist with reviewing and analyzing that. But otherwise, what we are planning on doing, according to the provisions of our current policy, we're going to be making some updated procedures and processes that are in compliance with the current policy that lean towards some of the changes that we were trying to make with the revised policy.
Okay. I guess if the council does pursue the task force, this body spent a lot of time last year on that. I think having representation from the planning commission would be a good thing. We've got a number of people that read that proposed regulation a lot and would have a lot to offer. Thank you. John?
I have a question for engineering. Did you say that if they put in a sidewalk with a curb, then parallel parking would be acceptable?
Yeah, I was referring to public on-street parking, just like in many other areas of town where you can park on the street and then the curb, or then the sidewalk is behind the curb, so there's a buffer between the vehicles and pedestrians.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other comments today? If not, I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Karen made the motion to adjourn. Mike Goller seconded that motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?